Hello.
Much love.
How are you?
Doing amazing, Angelica. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I'm here in Texas. It's been a bit cold today. It's been chilly.
Yeah,
I don't know what.
it's snowing down here in Toronto, Canada. Yeah.
Oh man, so I can't even complain. I can't even complain. It's looking like Christmas over
Yeah,
there.
it's like well over minus 16 degrees Celsius. So I know you guys use Fahrenheit, but that's really cold for us. So
Celsius, golly. What do you do to manage? How long have you been in Toronto?
my whole life, I grew up here in Toronto, Canada. Yeah.
Born and
Mm.
raised. Born and raised. Wow. So what are some tips and tricks for people if they made their way to Toronto and they weren't used to the cold? What would you advise?
Yeah, I mean, this temperature, I don't think even living in Toronto, like for 20 some odd years, I don't think anyone is fully ever going to be able to climatize. It's quite difficult, but really fostering that internal warmth is something that's going to help. Very, very
Yeah.
important. Yeah, so starting like leading into the winter months, like often in the fall,
Hmm.
we start to cultivate that inner warmth, that inner like heat and fire and furnace, so that once you do enter that cold climate, like today or just in general in the winter, you're able to withstand that temperature just a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I love how you described that, Angelica. You said fostering and really kindling the flame, really tending to the fire and just lifting it higher, cultivating the inner warmth, the inner flame, and keeping it sustained to keep it maintained. You
Mm-hmm.
know? How did you learn how to do that? When?
Yeah.
When did you learn how to do that?
Um, my journey's been very lengthy and it's evolved and changed over the years and like much others. I began in like the financial realm, so very analytical. I suffered with my own inner healing and inner journey, which, like many, that's how it often starts.
Hmm.
And that led me down the journey of holistic health and healing. So I've been in alternative medicine for over 6 years now.
Mm.
And slowly that kind of evolved into where I'm in now, which is Chinese medicine, which has kind of guided me. And yeah, it's been my soul path and mission to share the medicine with other people. But it's been an evolving journey, I would say, and it led me to this point. And at this point, it's a medicine that I truly believe in.
Mhm.
And I know that it's very helpful to a lot of others. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bringing the East to the West.
Yes.
You know, all of the best and leaving the rest. You know what I'm saying? The East to the West. I love this. TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, just bringing it in. And when you're talking about Angelica, the things that you battled with, throughout your healing journey, if you could walk us through, like, what were some of the
Mm.
struggles, some of the adversities and the challenges that you had early on?
Yeah. I mean, they began as long as I can remember. So a lot of things moving through childhood, I would say that's where a lot of things are deeply rooted.
Mhm.
Growing up as an only child in a household where communication lacked, and I dealt with a lot of digestive struggles, dismissed by Western medicine, very secluded and isolated is how I kind of felt.
Mhm.
And I spent years, turning outwards. So, like I'm dealing with all this stuff inwards, but I have no idea how to cope with it. So I'm going to turn outwards. So I turned to my studies. I got buried deep into, the financial world, and I was, top student in my mathematics degree. And, I pushed myself, but it was all like masks that I was putting up just to cope with what was going on internally.
Okay.
And so I also noticed that not only was the studying something that I was getting caught up in, but it was also relationships that I was using again to distract
Mm.
myself. So a lot of external distractions were some things that I noticed that my body attached to in order to avoid what was happening internally. And
Mhm.
once I started working in the financial industry, I slowly noticed my health was regressing even more and even more and even more. Just getting so caught up in the corporate world
Mm-hmm.
and this money-driven society. And no matter how much I worked, I noticed that I was always falling into this trap of I can do better, I can be better, chasing like a goal that was completely unattainable. And as I was doing this, my health was getting worse and worse. And, going to Western doctors and them telling me that it was all in my head and it was all made up and that there was nothing I could do and that here is this magical pill that you can take and it'll help you, temporarily. And I gave in to that at the time because, at that point, I was just looking for something, again, external outside of myself to help me, right? And so I got, fed down that pathway of here's this next pill, here's this next pill, and I did it. And now looking at it, of course, I would have done some things differently at the time, but it led me to this point in time. So after many years of kind of being in that Western medicine world, being dismissed, taking a bunch of other things, I kind of had this inner spark, I would say. It was just something that happened one day that I was like, there has to be something else. There has to be something more, And I went back to a time when I was really young. Like I was saying, I was an only child in a household that lacked communication. And so a lot of the times when I was by myself in that household, I'd be in my room and the only thing that there was myself and my breath. And so my breath is something that from, I would say, the age of maybe like 4 or 5, when I was feeling very anxious and alone, I would just be in my room breathing, right? And that was something that, it didn't come to me until, tens of years later where I was like, this has literally been the answer all along, right? So that's it. And so that moment kind of allowed me to, okay, maybe I need to stop searching outside of myself. Thousands and thousands of years ago, what was there? There was medicine women, there was healers, and there was all these people that allowed medicine of the earth to heal us because we are a direct reflection of the earth. Our internal system is basically a mirror of what's outside of us. And so over the years, we've just been distracted by all of these material things and things that don't exist outside of us. And so we use these things as a way to cope in the moment so that we can move forward, but really it's pushing us further and further back and disconnecting us from ourselves. And so when I was in that moment of like my breath is what is guiding me and what has always guided me, it allowed me to get more curious about alternative medicine. And then that kind of led me down the path of holistic nutrition. And then from there, more ancient practices and ultimately TCM, which is where I'm at today. And breathwork, of course.
Yeah. Oh my God. Beautiful, beautiful. What a journey. What a journey. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Angelica, just for sharing that and just for taking us down memory lane, giving us a walk down, the origins of where your journey has begun and how it has led you to this point. And I love how it sounds like you just, even after all of that, like you still have gratitude.
Of course.
It sounds like you still have gratitude for how it's gotten you here. Yeah. Like you're thankful, even though in the moment, it's tough to be thankful when we're going through it. It's hard to be grateful when we're growing through it. But when you're on the other side and you're like connecting the dots, looking backward, you're like, wow, you know what? I wouldn't be, where I am. I wouldn't be who I am. Like, wow, it was a blessing in disguise almost, I resonate with you on so many levels, Angelica. First of all, being an only child, so I'm an only child as well. And I grew up, I didn't grow up with any siblings around me. It was just me. And I spent a lot of time alone because there was a lot of dysfunction and a lack of communication as well in the household. So, my parents were always fighting. They divorced for the second time when I was 6 years old. Then my mom went later on to marry 3 other gentlemen and divorce all 3 of them. So I've seen like multiple, arguments, feuds, fights, disputes, like just crazy, just, communication, just war in the home, just war in the household. And eventually relationships for me as well became kind of like a repeat of the dysfunction, and also a distraction, as you called it a distraction. How you said that relationships at a certain point of your journey, why did you say that they were ultimately a distraction for you?
So I, at the time, like I was saying, I was in finance. So analytics was
Hmm.
something that I guess when my mind is so stuck on solving a problem, I get so deeply embedded into that journey. And so for me, relationships ended up being another puzzle to fix. So I was looking at all these different connections in my life, whether those were friends, whether those were partners, whether those were, colleagues at the time. I was looking at their struggles as a way for me to not look at my own and kind of latch on to them in terms of like another complex thing that my mind can kind of fix, quote unquote, but ultimately no one can fix it except yourself. But at the time I was like, I can help you. And so I took on like this savior role of I can do all of these things for you. So just be my friend. Hold on to me. Stay with me because I can help you. And so in of itself, it became a distraction for my own internal
Okay.
battle. And it also became a way that I could keep connection with others because I wasn't connecting with myself.
Hmm.
So ultimately for me, those were distractions because what I needed to do at that point was turning inwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I just want to thank you, Angelica. Just thank you for a moment because you're very concise. Like everything that you say is so succinct and concise. It's like every time, just as already as we've begun, you lay out these things almost like like in high school or back in school, we used to write essays or write
Mm-hmm.
papers, and we would have to used to write out the answer and like, this is why, this is why. It's very like
To the
you're very
point.
structured. Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
like you don't beat around the bush. You're not circling, everywhere. You're just like this. This is this is it. You know. So I really respect, your mind, and just like you said, the mathematical mind, the analytical mind, even the logical mind. I mean, it has its charms, it has its
Mm.
purpose, you know? You can still be in service. It definitely has purpose. So I just wanted to thank you, not to get off on a tangent,
Thank you.
but I just appreciate the way that you express, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah. So, my goodness, when you're talking about as well, you know, I was taking so many pharmaceuticals. I mean, with the dysfunction for myself, like you said, not knowing how to go inward and then always externalizing and going outward. I was kind of, disturbed as a child with all the things that I'd seen and the things that I absorbed. So they kind of threw me into psychologists and psychiatrists, and they prescribed me, the Adderall, the Strattera, the Concerta, like the ADHD, the depression, like all of that.
Mm.
So what were the meds that they were putting you on when you were younger that you had to go through as well?
Yeah. So for me, a lot of what I dealt with was fear.
Okay.
Fear was at the driving force, and fear is the most primal instinct of any human. If we can't emote fear, then that's something that's not coming through
Mhm.
naturally. There's something that's disconnected. So fear is the primal emotion, and that was something that I felt from a very, very young age.
Mhm.
I felt lack of protection. I felt isolated. It was this impending doom that I felt on a daily basis because I didn't have that connection to myself, my family. It didn't feel like I was a part of something. And so, physical symptoms will then start coming out if the emotional symptoms are not addressed. So, I dealt with daily digestive issues, which in TCM, in alternative healing, if there's an imbalance in our earth system or our digestive system, we're looking at what are we digesting that is not good for our being.
Mhm.
So for me, I was digesting, like you said, fighting in the family. I was digesting being alone all the time. So being alone with these negative thoughts. And so all the things that I was internalizing within my body was now creating these physical symptoms.
Mhm.
So I went to the doctor, and of course, it's all in her head. I was strapped down and tested on, and if you really feel like something's wrong with you, we're going to test for something, and everything came back inconclusive. So I was given anti-anxiety medications, depression medications. I was given, different like digestive aids. So they gave me antacid pills. They were giving me laxatives. They were giving me anything that would try to solve this problem, but nothing ever worked. Nothing. And so, at some point I was like, this is enough because more symptoms were starting.
Right.
Then I started to deal not only with the digestive symptoms, which was kind of the root of my problems, it started to go on to the hormonal cycle. And as women, once our hormones start to, get off balance, there's a deep problem going on, right? Because it's part of our natural rhythm. And so at that point, I was in finance, hormones were crazy. I
Mm.
was like, I'm not taking another medication. And for women, the main thing that they'll prescribe to fertile women is birth control if there's some sort of hormonal dysregulation.
Mm.
And so when it came to that, I was like, there has to be something else because birth control is now just shutting off our internal wisdom as women. So, and that's where I was like, oh, there has to be something else because now they're trying to shut down me as a being, as a woman. Now we're trying to shut off this connection, which was given to me, which is my right, which is my privilege. You're trying to disconnect me from that now. And so that's kind of where we're like, we got to dig deeper, right? And so it was just so many, it's one thing after the other. It was just one medication after the other. Yeah.
Man, man, oh man. I'm glad that you're not, that you're not back there, that
Mm.
no longer in that situation and that you made it through that time because like how tumultuous, like it's sounding right now and just torturous. It sounds like you said they strapped you down.
Yeah, that's something that I remember. It's like so vivid in my mind. It was the last, I guess, straw from my parents of like, okay, we need to figure this out for you. And
Yeah.
so it was like you are going to take these tests no matter what. And I still feel that moment in my body when I have to go do testing now. Even if even if it was like my own doing, like I wanted to go get this test done for myself, I still have that moment of whoa, like this happened, right?
Wow. So it's like the trauma, like the
Yeah.
scars, they're still there, the emotional scars, the mental scars, like just that trauma that just remains in the body and just yeah. Oh my goodness. And you even said, Angelica, that it was almost like they were gaslighting you. You
That's okay.
know?
Yeah.
Isn't that what it's called? Gaslighting?
Yeah, yeah. It's called gaslighting and they do it to so many people without them even knowing.
I recall this. You just jogged like you triggered something. I remember speaking with someone, Angelica, and it was a good friend of mine. Her name is Julie, and we had a talk on here, and she was telling us that at one point she, just like you said, with the hormones, the balance, she felt she was pregnant,
Mm.
right? And she just knew she was pregnant, and like she went to the doctors, and they said, "No, you're not pregnant." They said, "No, it's all in your mind. It's all in your head. Like, what are you talking about?" And they were going to do something. I forget what was going to happen, but they almost were going to have her like terminate what would have been her child. Her child is
Yeah.
alive and well today, but they were making her think she was crazy. And they were saying, "No, you're not pregnant." And she definitely was,
Mm.
you know? So she just listened to her own intuition. She listened to her body. But what do there's a lot that we can say about the medical field. My mother is a doctor, so it definitely has its uses. I mean, she's delivered so many babies. She's an obstetrician gynecologist. And, if somebody has acute systems, they break their leg, they want a doctor, they need a doctor. But when it comes to things like this, what do you have to say for for these situations
Mm.
in particular when it comes to just, the psychological damage and the toil that can happen when they're kind of subverting someone's own inner communication?
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge, huge topic that I could definitely talk on for like a very long time. So I'll try to be concise with it. But like you said, the Western field has its benefits. And with my own patients, if they're dealing with an acute case, the first person I'll refer them to is their general
Right.
practitioner, right? So I need to also know my limits in terms of what I can help and what I can treat. But when it comes to things that are more chronic or things that kind of slip under the rug in the Western aspect of things, the first thing patients need to do is trust and believe in themselves. So as a child in my own case, my problem was that I didn't believe my truth enough. And that was something that I worked through eventually. But it was, the thing outside of me is correct, and what I'm feeling inside must be false. So it's having that inner strength and that inner trust of this is not right for me. I should not be feeling this way. You know, I have to have the autonomy of there's something that isn't right within my being, and I need to now take it into my hands and find something that is going to be, aligned with my values that are going to help me overcome this specific thing. And so there's different tools, right? So the tools that I, lay out to different patients is first we start with something as easy as doing breath work. So if somebody is not open to alternative medicine yet, maybe I'll say, come and join a breathwork class, right? So within that 60 minutes, we'd send you on this journey where it's just you with yourself. And a lot of the times we're placed outside of ourselves on our daily basis, technology, all of these different misconstrued concepts outside of ourselves. But inside a breathwork class, you're faced with you and everything within yourself. So, all of those things start to come to the surface of, I shouldn't be feeling like this every day. This is where there's discomfort within my body. There's so much other things within my subconscious mind now coming through once I turn off all of that external stimulation. And that's where we get a lot of that feedback of there's so much stuff within me that I already know to be true. So it's that first belief that I can heal myself. That is what is kind of needed, right? And then once I start to get people kind of open to, wow, like I have all of this knowledge within myself, now what, right? Because sometimes it's overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming to be like flooded with all of this information and this truth that you've been dismissed with, all the time. It's just you're constantly being dismissed and distracted. And so now you have all of this knowledge within yourself and you're like, okay, now what? How do I start to get to the root of, overcoming these things that might be so minor to the Western field? Like, oh, I have a headache. It's fine. Let's just take a Tylenol or an Advil. But really that headache is telling you something. There's imbalance within your body, right? It's the way that your body is choosing to speak with you through all these different signs. And so then we start to go down the, a little bit deeper. We start to go in and can we use food as your medicine? Can we use, the meridians and the different energy systems to start to realign things, right? Can we use natural herbal medicine from the earth so that we can rebalance your system, right? And so once they start to notice like things are starting to come back in place and they're seeing little improvements within their own body, that wasn't me facilitating that, that was you, right? And so it's just helping to open up the mind to different possibilities of that it's literally all within yourself, right? As long as we're given the correct tools.
Right, right. The right tools at our disposal. I love this. I love this. Just, you're designing the rules, you're giving us tools, you're understanding the rules with all of these tools. These are some jewels, These are some gems you're dropping on us. Like, I'm loving this, you're just giving us, Angelica, like step by step by step. We're walking through this process together, we're making progress together. And this is awesome, tremendous work that you're doing with people to not only have the wisdom, to know, like you said, the limitations, to say, okay, maybe you need another, you need some other, but now we can do this facilitation, but there are certain things that can be taken care of someone else. But then, okay, then when it comes back to the belief, to find more relief with your own self-belief and to use the imagination to let go and to tap in, You know, it's amazing because you're triggering a lot of things right now as well. I just heard this the other day. Now, it's crazy just thinking about this because I don't know if you've already heard about things like this. Probably, you probably have. But when it comes to where memories are stored and where they are located, you know, people have done so much work, and there's even been, you know, I mean, crazy, horrendous, even though it's horrible, like scientific experiments like on rodents and
Hmm.
just, you know, innocent creatures to figure out like where is the memory located. So I remember hearing about these mice doctors, these doctors that were testing on mice. They were doing laboratory experiments. And you know the mouse running in the maze, you know, traditionally running in the maze. What they did, Angelica, they would somehow go in and they would chip away a little bit of the mouse's brain matter, like its brain. And then they would chip it away, and then they would let it run the maze, and it ran the maze again. Then they would take a little bit more of its brain, chip it away, and then it ran the maze again. They would take even another piece of its brain out, and it ran the maze again. Then they got all the way down to where it was nothing left but the brain stem, and the mouse still successfully ran through the maze. So they were asking themselves, they were scratching themselves, like, where is the memory? Like, where is it? Where is it? And what they discovered, like what they uncovered was it's not necessarily like up here. It's in the whole nervous system. Like the entire nervous system, it's the memory is dispersed throughout the whole body.
Hmm.
The whole body. And I remember hearing people who would do, you know, holotropic breath work, and they were awakening memories from decades ago. You know,
Hmm.
somebody reawakened the memory of their own birth, and they triggered like the trauma of them coming out of the womb, and then the doctor, you know, slapping them and them crying in the hospital room, and that memory came to life and they remembered that moment. I can't even imagine that moment, you know, but it's like everything is locked. They say the body keeps the score, you know.
Yeah.
So what can you say about these things when it comes to the memory, when it comes to where these things are stored in the body?
Yeah. I mean, again, in my own experience, this is something I see very often,
Hmm.
in one-on-one sessions. So when we're needling different spots within the meridians, within the body, some patients will start crying,
Right.
you know, or they'll start having like emotional releases, whether that's verbally or, energetically, like their body might start shaking. And that in of itself is just now physical proof to my being
Mhm.
that, there's something that was stuck within that body tissue, whether that's from years ago, whether that's ancestral, like there's something there that the body was able to remember within that tissue.
Mhm.
And so, like going off of your point, if somebody, for example, this rat, he was used to running that
Mhm.
path. And so his body, the tissues of the rat's body, started to take on this pattern. And even though parts of its mind were taken out, the physical body remembered that track. It remembered that that was something that it was used to doing. And so our bodies are the exact same reflection as that rat, right? You know, this might be triggering for some people, but let's say there was an abusive relationship that you might have dealt with, right? And our physical body is taking that hit day in and day out. And our tissues are going to absorb that. It's going to remember those feelings. And even though your mind is very wise, and what your mind does is it tries to erase, it tries to get rid of those things so that we disassociate with this trauma because it's something that our mind cannot fathom, but our body remembers. And so even though we're physically, we might be physically being abused, we might just dismiss it. We might disconnect with it. We might disassociate with it. But the body will always remember that physical pain and that physical trauma. And so, years later, you might be out of that relationship. Maybe your new partner, your loving partner, somebody who's no longer within the same energetic frequency as the person you were with, they might touch you somewhere and your body will remember,
Mhm.
right? Everything will start kind of flooding through. It's because your tissues start to kind of take on this form, almost like a memory foam mattress that you keep piling on these things, these different layers, they're all still there buried within the tissue. And one day things will start coming back, just even the littlest things. And that's what I'll also notice, like you said, in holotropic breathwork, people have these experiences. Just in regular breath too, you'll notice that, you start to release, your body might start shaking involuntarily. And we love that, because when we see emotional releases or physical releases, the body's starting to let go of that memory. It's starting to let go of that pain and that trauma that is stored deep within the tissues, right? Even in my acupuncture sessions, we want that release, because that means you're no longer carrying that burden within your tissues, within your body. And so it's important, yes, obviously, to understand that there's memory within the system, for good things, but it also stores a lot of negative experiences and trauma. And so we need to also be able to turn inwards and realize that this load that our bodies has absorbed is not ours to carry anymore. Yeah.
Right. Oh man, tremendous, tremendous testimony. Thank you. Thank you just for that breakdown and that eloquent explanation that it's not yours. You can surrender, you can let it go, you can release, to find more relief, you can relinquish and just get it off your shoulders. You've been carrying it. It just reminds me of that song, like Erica Badu. Erica Badu? She got a song called Bag Lady. You heard Bag Lady?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you gonna hurt your back, dragging all those bags like that. Like we just carry so much on our shoulders, and it sounds like we carry it as we grow older. So it can stiffen up and grow colder if we keep this all on our shoulders. It's like, wow, the issues inside of the tissues. Like, I love your analogy, to be able to release these things and to not increase these things. That is the objective, I feel like. And I love how you said, like, this is what we want. When somebody has a reaction or somebody might think like, oh, well, why are they shaking? Isn't that wrong? Is something's going on? And you're like, no, this is good. They need to get it. Like, you're like, this is a good sign. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So when it comes, Angelica, circling back to what you were talking about, the codependent relationships and, kind of seeing relationships maybe in a mathematical way of solving a problem or solving a formula or finding the function within the dysfunction. Like, just stay with me and I can solve this, let's just be together. And now, how do you go about relations today? If you're in a relationship or, a situation today where you have a significant other, how have you changed the way that you address that now?
Yeah. And I mean, that's something I believe is always going to be evolving for myself, because, again, human nature, it's easy to fall back into pattern.
Okay.
But the difference now is having the awareness of, okay, this is a pattern that I create for myself often. And I notice when that pattern starts to represent itself, even if it's in the littlest ways, it's a sign for me to come back to myself. There's some need that I'm not meeting within myself that I'm now trying to find within somebody else. So it's needless to say, everyone, again, is human, even myself, and I still will fall into codependent patterns. However, I have a plan now in how I can easily get out of that and not attach to that definition, right? And I think that's where the importance is that understanding that in the human journey, it's not linear, right? There's going to be ups and downs, and evolution is allowing us to step a little bit higher each time. And in my relationships currently, whether that's friends, whether that's with patients, because even with patients, I notice I can get super involved in wanting to fix. But again, it's coming into that, okay, I can recognize that the pattern is beginning, step out of it for a second, take a second, turn inwards. What does Angelica need in this moment? Because I notice that the pattern easily begins again when I start to neglect myself. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if I've had a super long week where I've been expending myself, with patience and workload and just not tuning into myself, I will start to become a little bit more codependent in my partner.
I
I will
see.
start to become over analytical in my partner.
Mm,
Not to the point of before, but I'll notice it's starting to happen. I'll notice the way my body energy will
mm,
change, and I'll notice the feelings changing within my being too. And so it's taking a moment, stepping out of yourself and saying, okay, what do I need right now? And whether that's, okay, I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to do some breath work while I'm walking. And I'm going to start to analyze, where is there energy in my body that's off and how can I address that within myself?
mm,
Maybe it's, spending time doing some Qigong or Tai Chi or something to realign my own energy because, we have to cultivate that energy within ourselves in order to show up for everyone else anyway. So we start with ourselves. So over time, I've noticed that in order to break free of a lot of those dependency, that
mm.
codependency, it's again turning inwards. That's the answer to literally everything. It's if something outside of myself is, I'm becoming attached to something outside of myself, it's because I'm losing that attachment within myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful explanation. So it's like going within so you don't go without,
Yeah.
You'll never go without when you go within. Yeah. This is awesome, just the understanding that it wasn't necessarily that you were trying to protect yourself, but sometimes it felt like you wouldn't respect yourself because you would neglect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then just bringing that back to the self and understand that self-love is not selfish, self-care is not selfish, these things. It's like we can't take care of anyone else if we don't go back and take care of the self.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. So, you spoke as well, and this is very relatable because all of these things I relate with, even from the relationships to, just being heavily medicated. Before I got heavily meditated, I was I was heavily medicated,
Mm-hmm.
before we got meditated, you know. But when it comes to finances, coming in the finance field, being in the corporate world and having that view of money and then changing your view and rearranging your view, I'd love to know what is your view today, Angelica, when it comes to, when people talk about finances or,
Mm-hmm.
what is wealth? What is abundance? What is prosperity? What is money? What is it? What are your definitions today?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's changed a lot since I was in the financial world. Of course, my goal when I was in that field was, to have a monetary wealth. It was, what job will bring me the most abundant amount of
Right.
money so that I can feel safe. That was kind of like my rationale for going into the field
Mhm.
and doing the job that I wanted to do. And so after I noticed that even though I was getting this, monetary reward, my health obviously fell because of it, right? So even though I had all this, this money, which is needed in this world in order to survive and to live, because it's the way that we exchange here in this physical world, my health was now taking a toll, right? So even though I would be able to be financially secure, it's like, am I happy?
Mm,
Right? Am I living to my fullest potential? It
mm,
was all these questions again. It's like I had this like awakening, I would say, at this point in time. But it quickly shifted as I moved into alternative medicine
mm.
to the point so much so of like an unrealistic view. It was, I want to help everyone and let's take away money. So I was doing a lot of stuff now out of like, just out of the goodness of my heart, right? I was, treating people for free. I was doing classes for free. I was traveling and doing classes abroad for free. So, I was putting in a lot of monetary, expenditure into trainings and to hosting these classes, but I felt that I didn't deserve to be paid for it
Mm,
because it was something that I felt everyone needed.
mm,
So at that point, I was like, let's get rid of money. I was completely shifted my mindset from one extreme to the next, right? At that point, I was going from I need to be so wealthy to I am wealthy off of the exchange that I'm receiving from everyone, right? And at that, at the beginning, it felt very rewarding and so great. But over time, I noticed I was getting burnt out a little bit because it is an energetic exchange. I'm providing you with this wealth of knowledge and I'm helping you uncover these things within yourself, right? But I am not getting something in return in order for me to then feel my being and to continue to gain the knowledge so that I can continue to help. So it was for years very one-sided,
For
right? And so
years?
years.
Wow, wow. Okay.
And so over time, I was very burnt out, right? Because I did choose at that time to go back to school for Chinese medicine. And with that comes a lot of monetary exchange. It's not like you just shadow somebody for free. I have to exchange something in that point. So, over time, I was like, okay, I need to also understand that money will also not only be a fair exchange for service, but it will also allow me to understand my worth, right? Because I believe my knowledge is worth something. So I should be feeling like I am able to charge something for it. And so it was coming in with this relationship of, okay, money is not extremely evil. It's we've made it evil. And that's how my mindset was going from finance to alternative medicine. It was this feeling of like money is so evil. It's created so much distortion and chaos within our world. And so like for me it was what I'm giving you, ancient wisdom. I'm bringing that forward now to help you. I shouldn't have to use this evil exchange for it, right? But again, that's something that I told myself. It was a story that I've told myself. And I've noticed that words are super powerful, right? And so by saying that, I was believing that. And so over time, after the burnout, I was like, I am able to exchange this and feel good about it and understand that it's an equal trade. They're getting something valuable and I'm getting something valuable. And if it, in of itself, I feel like now there's more abundance because not only am I able to sustain myself and my practices and my knowledge, but at the same time now I'm giving you something rewarding, right? So there's more than just that. And so I believe too that if you're heavily restricted on money, if you hold it so dear and strapped to your body without that fluidity, nothing's going to come in and nothing will come out. So I do think there needs to be like a free flow of energy when it comes to finances, but there also has to be a good mindset around it's not something that's evil, even though people do evil with it. It's something that we do need as humans to continue to thrive and survive and move forward. So I think it's all perspective.
Thank you for bringing that perspective, just like within the collective, because there's so many perceptions, everyone has a different direction where they allocate, these resources and just the resourcefulness of, just the form of exchange that we have here as we're just, in the world, like how we are right now, just the way that we interact with each other, and the way that, like you said, the form of exchange, and then the feeling of like, okay, coming from the corporate world and then saying, you're going to go way to the opposite extreme. And you're saying, you know what, I'm just going to give, and I don't deserve to receive, because if I receive, then I'm saying, you know? So to be able to reframe and retrain that, some people, it takes a lot of psychological work. Like some people, they write down affirmations, they speak affirmations, or they listen to different things to reprogram. Are you that type of individual that you need to retrain and reprogram in that way? Or do you just say, you know what, this is what it is, and you just
Yeah.
continue?
For me, the belief has to come within first.
Right.
Yeah, and I've noticed that that's my pattern, no matter how much I'm hearing it from the outside of me. Like I can listen for days to, other sources telling me like affirmations or this is the way, right? There's so many podcasts that you know, or lay out kind of like a formula of
Mm-hmm.
how you can now change this mindset. And, you know, I tried all of those things when I was in my transitional period,
Mm-hmm.
but until that came from me, where I was like, that aha moment within myself, that's the only way that I'm able to kind of move forward.
Okay.
And that's just, you know, that's me. It's not everyone. But
Right.
for myself and my being, I noticed that in order for me to make change and believe change, the truth has to be within myself.
Right.
And that spark of like, this is how it has to now change has to be within myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not saying that's the right way because it does take a little bit longer that way to have those realizations and to
Mm-hmm.
instill those patterns. But I still strongly believe in like inner truth and inner wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
where it's, you know, once you believe it to be true, that's when you're able to kind of have that momentum to move forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, speaking of the momentum, because the mental shift and how your energy lifts once you no longer resist, you know, once you're no longer in resistance, and just to be your own witness of things changing in your reality once they change in your mentality. I'd love to hear as well, Angelica, you know, just coming from a mind such as yours, have you found magical moments even within like the analytical, the logical, the mathematical? Have you seen majestic and mystical and magical moments that happened in the outer world when you had a change on that level? Like what's one of those examples if you have any?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, as much as I'm analytical, and I would say I'm sometimes more yang in nature.
Ah.
I do have my yin moments and my like more mystical kind of side as well. And you know, but it only happened, like you were saying, once kind of everything came into place, like in terms of like understanding this inner truth. And over the years, it's kind of, I would say, what I would call it is divine
Yeah.
alignment. So there's been a lot of that. Yeah. There's been a lot of divine alignment and little like gifts, I would say, along the way, which helped me get to the point of where I am, that it's like there was no coincidence
Mm.
here. It's like my mind could not have created, well, in a way, it was able to align with that reality to put that into place into my field, but it's not that my mind was able to analytically solve how this happened. Like those things wouldn't have been able to happen in that moment, right? And
Yes.
so
Yes.
the way that I would say those things happened was right after I quit my job. So in order to quit the financial job, my mindset had to shift, right? My mindset shifted from I need money to survive. I need to fix all of these different corporate problems in order to feel fulfilled. Once my mindset shifted from that to okay, I need to now go inwards and heal myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's when things started to kind of ripple and move forward, where I got aligned with a job that allowed me to meet individuals that are now like some of my sisters and people that I work very closely with, that if I didn't land that job
Mm.
after financial industry, I wouldn't have been where I am today,
Right.
right? I was able to meet different people that helped me along my
Mm.
path, that it's like they just fell into my lap, right? And so I do believe that there's an energetic side to everything as well as a logical analytical side, and that's what makes us human. And it's the amazing thing about humans. But there has been a lot of different like magical moments throughout my journey as well. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. You know,
Mm,
thanks for sharing that piece because I love hearing stories like that, things that we cannot explain,
no.
you know, like all the thinking and all the cognitive faculty and research, like we could not explain how this happened. We just know that it happened. You know, like it happened,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know? And I just have so many stories of that. And I love hearing other people's stories of that where you're like, you know what? It was only looking back. I think Steve Jobs said this as well, Angelica. Steve Jobs said, you can never connect the dots looking forward. You know, it's like you always connect them looking back. When you reflect, you connect. You're like, wait a minute.
Hmm.
That that had to happen. Because if that didn't happen, then this wouldn't happen, you know? And there were so many times as well, like that it was only when my mind shifted that everything lifted, and then something was gifted. It was
Mhm.
like something was gifted once my mind shifted. Somebody told me this, and I'm getting goosebumps talking to you, because things just start popping up. They just come back to your memory. He said that nothing changes until you change.
Mhm.
But once you change, everything
Everything
changes.
changes.
And it was so simple. It was just it's just the simplest phrase, but it made so much sense later on when I realized, oh wow, it wasn't that these things had to change. No, she didn't have to change. He didn't have to change. I had to change. You know, I changed. And even I've gone back into situations and they're like, wow, you changed. Like you
Mhm.
are not the same, you know? So just to have that parallel and to see that in your life, I think it's a wonderful thing, because you said, Angelica, that when you were going in the finance world, amassing the money and wondering, okay, where can I go to get the money? Like, what's the best place I can be to get the money? And then you realize, wait, but where's the happiness? Like, I'm not happy. So what would you say your definition is today? You know, different people have different definitions of what happiness is. What do you feel it is to be, happy? What's happiness for you?
Happiness, I would say, is it's a feeling for sure. It's this deep inner feeling of just peace and gratitude.
Hmm.
Happiness for me, where I feel the happiness is when I'm in solitude with myself,
Hmm.
when I'm disconnected from distractions. It's when I'm connected to the deepest parts of myself
Hmm.
and where I'm the happiest. It tends to be by water and
Hmm.
sunshine. Those are my two areas that I feel like my body thrives and I feel the happiest. But happiness to me also does not have a material attachment to it. Um, there is nothing that can buy my happiness, right? Happiness for me is lived through experience.
Hmm.
And so for me, I would say happiness is peace, experience, and self-knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your peace has no price. It's priceless. There's no price that you could put on your peace. There's nothing you can put on your happiness. Like there is no price tag. Yeah. Nothing can buy it. I like that. You're like, nothing can buy it. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. My last question I had for you, Angelica, was you mentioned earlier about, your self-love practices or your self-care practices as well. You mentioned Qigong. So how long have you been doing Qigong?
So within my studies, it's a requirement. It was a requirement at the time to also, learn the self-cultivation aspects of being, a TCM practitioner. It's
Right.
not all wasn't all about learning the different tools to help the patient. It was how can I cultivate my own energy
Right.
in order to show up and have that, equal exchange, whatever the patient is releasing during that session, make sure that your energy's strong, your barrier's strong, create that defense.
Mhm.
And so it was taught alongside the TCM curriculum as well. So we would start our mornings with it, we would end our days with it. And so that routine kind of just stuck.
Mhm.
Um, so just, I would say, over 2 years. Yeah, it was
Nice.
it's been like a small little practice that I'll do like for 5 minutes in the morning,
Yeah.
just before I start my day, or if I know that my energy is running a little bit low,
Hmm.
or if I'm starting to pick up on energy because um, I'm very like attuned to others' energy. And so if there's a big emotional release during a session, I'll notice my energy might be a little bit more dwindled or low at the end of it.
Hmm.
So I'll come back home and I'll make sure that my, energy hygiene is up to par. And so I'll cleanse my field and I'll make sure that I realign my energy.
Energy
Yeah, with those practices.
hygiene.
Energy hygiene, yeah.
Energy hygiene. You hear this? Spiritual hygiene, that energy hygiene. You're like, oh man, I gotta be fresh and so clean, you know? Gotta keep my field so serene. You know what I mean? Like the energy hygiene. That's a great term. That's a great phrase to use. Like, we're spending time scrubbing the body, but when are we scrubbing our energy? Our
Hmm.
field, our aura, that is like, when is that revealed? When is that healed? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, this is good. This is so good. So that's become a daily practice. You're saying you're using it also to plug in. Like if you need to plug in the outlet, you need a pick me up, you need a little boost,
Hmm.
kind of like the caffeine of the universe, like nature's coffee. You're synchronizing into the rhythm. And you said just even 5 minutes. You said just five
Yep,
minutes in the rising. That's it.
even
That's all
that.
you need.
Yeah.
Wow.
At this point, though, in my journey, I feel like it's 5 minutes. But when I was first starting, we would do like sequences for like 30 to 40 minutes before we started class.
Right.
And now I just feel like in order to ground, reset, just like 5 minutes in the morning, aside from like my meditative practices, like that's something I'll do physically with my body.
Yeah. Wow. So it's like, somebody gets up, they take a shower, they brush their teeth, but then they also got to scrub their energy. You
Exactly.
know, don't go outside without scrubbing your energy, just make sure you
No. It's important.
Beautiful. It's necessary. It's
Hmm.
necessary. So, blessings, Angelica. Thank you so much for just
Thank you.
coming on today and speaking with us, sharing, your timeless wisdom, the testimony, your learnings, along your journey. And thank you also just for illustrating all these things that when we have blockages in the body and things that need to be worked out, that the body keeps the score, that it stays in until we can usher it on its way. And we can do that by going within. We don't have to go without when we go back within. So if somebody's been listening to you and they just really enjoy your energy and want to get in touch with you or in tune with you, what would be some services or any offerings that you could tell people that you have available? Is there a great place that people can go to get
Hmm.
more?
Yeah, so the account that I am linked to on this profile
Mhm.
is more of my personal breathwork kind of account, but my actual practitioner account is my first name dot my last name. So it's Angelica dot Abate, Abate.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I dive more into, more of the practitioner-based knowledge, and how to like realign the body through acupuncture, herbs, and other holistic modalities. So
Okay.
that's kind of where most people will connect to me. However, this page is also open for connection as well, whatever you see most fit. I do most of my um, consultations through, in-person offerings. However, I do have some virtual offerings too.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know that's how we interconnect nowadays is through this virtual realm. So I make myself open in both ways. But yeah, so those are the two different channels that you can meet with me and connect with me.
Beautiful. And that's
Hmm.
Angelica Abate.
Yes.
Beautiful. I love the receptivity. You're like, I'm opening myself. We're in the wave of technology. We're in the age, I'm keeping it open. I'm keeping the line open. Wow. Blessings.
Thank
Blessings.
you.
So much love, Angelica. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Enjoy and just, yes, this has been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. And thanks everyone for
Thank you,
listening.
everyone.
Appreciate having y'all on here. Much love. Much love.